I'm Terrence James, and the question I have for us today is, after being lucky enough to review both the all-new Dodge Hornet and Alfa Romeo Tonale, which one would I go with, and would I go with gas or plug-in hybrid? So let's go over an overview of what are these things, tell you about the look of them, whether we like it or not, how practical are they, and the performance, which will lead us to our final thoughts. So here we go. All right, so we are off. So the first thing to talk about is, well, what are these things? Well, one and the same. They're built off the Alfa Romeo platform for a small, compact, in the case of the Alfa Romeo, a premium little SUV, lifted hatchback, whatever you want to call it nowadays. They're kind of all getting blurred together. I'm a hatchback person myself and still can't figure out why, because they're all around the same money, why you just wouldn't go with the more sporty, agile one, which also happens to be all-wheel drive nowadays, like GR Corollas and Golf Rs and things like that. Wide range of things that have around the same space you can get for premium, good look, sporty, whatever. But a lot of people, you know, each their own, really like these little crossovers. They like being up a little bit higher, and that's exactly what these are. And it's interesting because the Stellantis group now is Dodge and Alfa Romeo, and other companies as well. So what Dodge did was they said, hey, you know what? We got this wonderful parts bin. Well, let's go into the old Italian, and we'll get the Italian platform, and we'll build it there and use some of those materials. So, you know, I guess the first thing to say is, let's talk about price, because really that's why we're kind of comparing these two things. Because you look at, like, well, how can you compare a Dodge with an Alfa Romeo? Aren't they kind of the opposite? Well, in certain ways in marketing, yes, but they're coming off the same factory line essentially, and that means if you're buying a Dodge, you're getting a pretty good deal as far as something that looks that good, drives that well, and just really, I'd say, well put together. Now, we'll say that with bated breath because it's an Italian vehicle, and they do a good job with making things really exciting and good looking and everything, but they have a bit of a stigma behind them for things not really working all that well all the time, especially with Lamborghini and things like that. Now, Dodge also had that reputation, and, you know, reading on the forums and things like that, you are getting some alpha issues with this, but Dodge used to always have issues too, and no vehicles are perfect nowadays, and most people are going to probably lease these, and you got warranty and things like that. But as far as the driving experience goes, like we said, you're probably starting around $40,000 for that Dodge Hornet. They offer, I think, a GT or an RT. The GT would be kind of the base model, if you will, and the RT is a fancier plug-in hybrid, faster one with the Brembos and all that kind of stuff. Now, you're going to start off on the base GT around $40,000 Canadian, plus fees and taxes, and it comes pretty well equipped nowadays. Now, before we go any further with that, you're going to be looking at the Sprint and the Veloce for the Alfa Romeo. Now, they're about $7,000, $8,000 something dollars like that Canadian, more. So, reason why we're comparing it, and I know we're in difficult times and things like that, and I'm not trying to spend anyone's money, but I would assume if you can afford a $40-something thousand vehicle, it doesn't really matter if it's $6,000 or $7,000 apart. So when you look at it that way, you really are kind of cross-shopping with that Alfa Romeo with the Tonale. Tonale with the Hornet. So what I mean by that is really pick your price, because you're going to range anywhere from the low 40s for the Dodge version and into the mid to high 40s for the Sprint or the base of the Alfa Romeo, and then you can get all the way up to near $70,000 for both those. And again, the Alfa Romeo is just going to be a few $1,000s more in every trim, but you are going to get a little bit more styling, and that's kind of what we're talking about right now. So I personally, from a side profile, as you can see, they're pretty much the exact same vehicle. Really on the back as well, where they're going to differ is the lights. You're going to get nicer lights on the Tonale, in my opinion. Again, that's subjective. They're not necessarily nicer as far as functionality goes, but I really do kind of like that Corvette-y look of the three lights in the front and back on the Alfa, and I really like the triangular snout, if you will, on the Alfa front. And when we get on the inside, again, that's where it's going to differ a little bit. Sometimes, like my or my BRZ is almost the same as the Toyota version, like aside from badges, literally. Whereas this is a little bit different, and it is a little bit different in a nicer way on the inside in the Alfa. So on the dash there, you're going to get less hard plastics and things like that on the Alfa, but you also get that kind of cool metal looking thing and the round vents opposed to kind of the more boxier looking ones on the Dodge. And what I think kind of neat is too, and I don't know why they made the difference on this, but down here they put the DNA, or your basically mode changer, on your Alfa, and the start button on the steering wheel, but it's the opposite on the Dodge. Why? I don't know. I really think that's kind of cool. The DNA is kind of fun, things like that. But as you can see on the Alfa, it really, it's more of an elegant twist, and the Dodge is supposed to be the more sporty one, but really Alfa is, it's a sporty Italian company. So they put those amazing paddles, and I could go all day. I don't know why these companies take away our manual transmission, even though people still say that they want them and things like that, and then they give us these paddles on most cars, which are, I find it offensive almost, because it's like, don't you understand what we really want? And your idea of science and pushing things forward and see how fast we can go, you've taken the driver essentially out of it. So at least give us some fun paddles. Now with the Alfa, they want to try to keep a lot of that driving experience in there. So I haven't had the chance to drive that same engine, the 1.3 hybrid one in the Dodge, but I'm assuming that it would be very similar. And one of the things that I like is grunty. It's like my little Volkswagen. It's got a grunty little sound to it, the exhaust, things like that. Yeah, I quite like it. Now, before we quit talking about this, when we talk about competition, now again, it's strange to say that these could possibly be competition for the right person, someone like me who's not wrapped up in, I have to have an Alfa for prestige and things like that. I might want to save a little money if basically I'm getting almost the same thing, why not? But there's some people that, they want to be seen in the Alfa, and I understand, because it is a good looking vehicle, and Alfa has tried to do a little bit to differentiate themselves with that vehicle to make it a little bit better looking, and things like that. So, but if you look at those two extremes of those vehicles, let's just use the Alfa for instance. If you are kind of a dedicated Alfa type buyer, BMW, things like that, you might want to look at the Volvo XC40 Recharge. We had an opportunity to do that one, and that's fully electric, but it's a good little vehicle. It's also premium, small, things like that. It's not identical, but it's close. It's similar type pricing. You could afford one, you could afford the other. And then with the Dodge, I would say probably the Honda CR-V hybrid. And again, we don't have to get to hybrid, but we're talking hybrids right now. I would say that would probably be good competition. Again, we had an opportunity to test that as well. So, I've got some experience in all those. Now, the Honda is not going to be as much premium. They have tried to do a really good job with this new generation of Hondas to make them a lot more premium than they used to be, but they have to be careful because they have the Acura brand. But yeah, I would say it's on par with the Dodge in the sense that they're both really nice for what they are. Now, when we talk about what they are, well, they are small, compact SUVs. As we said, I already went on my rant. I personally, like I said, I would rather have my GTI or Golf R or something if I'm going to have that limited amount of space, which is about 27 cubic feet with the seats up, and about double that, 55 cubic feet with the seats down. So, it's a 103-inch wheelbase. It's identical to my GTI. Now, I live with the GTI, enjoy the GTI. I found a way to make it work with a small family and things like that, because I am about driving and driving experience, so I will pack light in order to make a vehicle like that work. And that's why I really don't like these small SUVs, because that extra ride height, I don't feel that much safer, especially now when you have cars that range from anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 pounds driving around. That extra inch isn't really going to help. I personally would rather get out of their way easier, because with this platform, unlike the other Alfas, unfortunately, because of packaging, they've gone with a strut. It is independent suspension, which is amazing, and they have adaptive dampers that work really, really well and things like that, but it is strut all the way around. Normally, they have a multi-link system on most SUVs, so it does not control its body weight as well as you would hope, going around corners and things like that, but it's not bad by any means. I'm being extra picky because it's an Alfa Romeo, and Dodge is all about performance and things like that. So, and again, I'm comparing it to something like a GTI, which is known for that. So they do handle really, really well and drive well, but because of that packaging, to try to make them as usable as you can, you do suffer a little bit that way. But one of the things that I like, though, is they've tried to do their best to bridge the gap between looking really good, trying not to date themselves, but putting buttons in the right spot. So I really like the fact that they have kept hard buttons, and like my GTI, it kind of angles towards you on both those vehicles, the Hornet and the Tonale, which I think is pretty cool. I like that. Yeah, and I mean, look at how gorgeous both the infotainments and those digital gauge clusters are on both those. I think something like a 12-inch and a 10-inch, but regardless, they look incredible. And I believe they use the Uconnect system user interface, which is great for both companies. Now, one of the things too, and you're looking, again, let's just stay in here for a second when we're talking about, of course, you've got these beautiful materials and things like that. We already talked about the styling, but with functionality, you do have cup holders in the doors, you got cup holders in the middle, you've got all kinds of spots and things to tuck things away. No, it's not a giant SUV or Lincoln Navigator, things like that, but they have done a pretty good job in trying to find it, you know, just the right spots to hide just the right things. And then, of course, you get all the modern things nowadays. Like you can get, not necessarily with the base, but you can get wireless charging on both those vehicles. Basically, they come really, really well equipped on both the Sprint and the GT. And as you go up, you're really going to get some more sophisticated equipment. So you're going to get things like ventilated seats opposed to just heated. You're going to get the nicer micro suede and leather opposed to that really cool looking cloth type material they have. Things like that. But you're also going to get the better safety system. So I love that Honda included that we talked about. These companies are giving so many, not free, you're paying for them, but on the base level. But as you go up, you can still kind of get a little bit better things. So for instance, on both companies, you can get the 360 camera, which I really like because it's clear and crisp and responsive and everything else like that. But I love the front cameras. You don't really need it on such a small vehicle, but I really think it's an important thing to have, because nowadays these vehicles are so expensive. Just wrecking anything in the front can be very expensive, right? So, and you spend this much money in these vehicles, you don't want scrapes and everything all over them. So these cameras, I think, are really helpful, and obviously for safety things as well. Now, when we talk about performance, well, both the GT and the Sprint, the base versions, if you will, of these, they use a 2-liter 4-cylinder turbocharged engine. That works really well. It's good. You know, it's a fairly heavy little thing. It's 37-ish 100 pounds on the base ones. But yeah, you're getting like 260-something horsepower, almost 300 pound-feet of torque out of that engine. And, you know, you're probably, you know, mid-high 20s miles per gallon combined, realistically. And then on the Sprint and the RT, you can get that 1.3 liter turbocharged single overhead cam plug-in hybrid with the 15 kilowatt lithium battery. That's going to give you around 30 miles or 50 kilometers worth of range, which is great. So that engine, again, you're probably going to get in the high 20s when you're just using gas, and when you add that extra on, I still don't figure out how they calculate it, but it's in the mid to high 70s for your miles per gallon E. So I don't know, that to me sounds pretty good. I just think it's pretty cool, the fact that you can drive around town. Like for me, I barely go anywhere. You know, some of these dealerships and things like that aren't far from my house, so I wouldn't use any gas at all, you know, which is pretty cool. But, you know, if you do want to go on big trips, because there's not a lot of infrastructure, especially here in Canada, and I live in a pretty big city, and it's getting better, but it's still not great. So, you know, if you want to go on big trips and things like that, both these vehicles, you can still do it. So for me personally, I think that extra little bit of zip is worth the extra money and the extra little bit of fuel economy, and the fact that you can do that. When we say a little bit of extra zip, it is pretty zippy, both of them actually. It's 6.5, something like that, high 6s on that 2-liter base, which sounds terrible nowadays with these 0 to 60s in 2-3 seconds on normal everyday vehicles for electric and stuff. But I'm telling you, that's faster than my BRZ. So, you know, that feels like it's moving 10 years ago. And then the little plug-in hybrid, 1.3, you're looking at it around the mid 5-second range, which again, you know, you go, oh, that's not that fast. But when you compare it to other segments like a Civic Type R, well, that's the type of speed a Civic Type R is, and that's known as a fast hatchback. So, you know, it's all in perspective. So it is a good little performer. It is pretty good on gas. Like you said, sometimes with Alfa Romeo and Dodge, you're going to get a few little squeaks and rattles you may not want, some lights flickering here and there, but you are going to get a good driving vehicle packed full of lots of technology and good looks, which leads me to my final thoughts. All right, final thoughts time. Well, We pretty much said it all. If you don't care about being seen in an Alfa over a Dodge, you know, the Dodge is going to save you probably $7,000 or $8,000 for the same thing. And if you prefer that look, then I don't think that you could really go wrong, as long as you know that you're buying a Dodge and an Alfa. That you could have a few of those little problems, but that's where you have warranties, and most people lease nowadays and things like that. And then again, if you do want to go with that Alfa and you want to spend just a little bit more, you are going to get a lot more in the sense of styling and nicer materials and things like that. So I don't think with either one of those vehicles you can go wrong at that price point. They're both right around that Canadian mid $50,000 range, which is scary to think that's an average price nowadays. And when it comes to the gas or the electric, well, again, that's personal preference. They're both going to give you great fuel economy for what they are, and you know, it is nice to be able to have that extra ability to go around without spending any money on gas and just plugging it in when you get home with the plug-in hybrid. So that would probably be my choice. I think actually I would go with the Alfa Romeo. Now that we say it, that's an honest answer. I just like the way it looks. Alfa Romeo plug-in hybrid. You tell me what you think in the comments, and thanks for watching.